Tanvi, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Hey there, little storytellers. My name is Tanvi Kundra. I study in grade 7 at Kundecha Education Academy. Let's talk about storytelling and why it's so important. You know how much fun it is when someone tells you an exciting or magical story, right? Well, that's because stories have a special superpower. They take us on incredible adventures without leaving our seats. When we hear or read stories, our minds start to create amazing pictures in our heads. We imagine the characters, the places they visit, and the exciting things that they do. It's like we have our very own movie theater in our minds, and we get to be the directors and artists. Stories often have important lessons hidden inside them, like little treasures waiting to be discovered. We learn about kindness, bravery, friendship, and so much more. Finally, when you become a storyteller, you feel confident and proud of yourself. With this in mind, Active Kids is so proud to host this exclusive workshop for us today in Storycraft, the art of telling a captivating story. To conduct this workshop, we have amidst us a very seasoned speaker, author, and storyteller herself, Ms. Deepa Surendran. I call upon Arshia Sheikh to tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Miss Deepa Surendran is a distinguished Toastmaster who is playing significant roles at the district levels and was also awarded as the Best Division Director and District Outstanding Toastmaster of the Year. She has also authored two books, which is a collection of short stories. By profession, she is an IT application specialist, trainer, and auditor by profession, and is currently pursuing PhD in computer science, etc. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time with us. We are honored to have you amidst us today. Over to Tanvi.
Thank you, Arshia. Now let me invite our club coach, Ms. Taranum Sheikh, to give her opening address.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. Just give me a moment. Yes, right. All right, children. A very good morning and good afternoon to children in two different time zones. Let me start by asking you all to be detectives. Yes, story detectives. That means you're going to analyze the word story, S-T-O-R-Y, and tell me what would S represent to you when you think about the word story. I'm sure you know how acrostic poems are written, right? So you have the vertically, you write the letters of the word, and then you write each letter what it represents about the topic. So what do you think? What comes to your mind when you think about story? How would you like to say, use the word S? Anybody? Come on. Our judge can also participate. I mean, sorry, our facilitator can participate too. Yeah, Shreyas, what would S be for you?
Super exciting.
Okay, so you find stories super exciting. Thank you, Shreyas. Anything else? Can I get one more response? Come on, kids. You love to tell stories and you love to listen to stories. So please grab this opportunity. Yeah, Yansh.
So, ma'am, I would say stories are something of your own fantasy. So I can go on story writing or storytelling and make my own fantasy.
Amazing. Stories take you to a new world. It helps you
Or I
imagine.
can take my problems and make a solutions for them in my stories.
Absolutely. Very imaginative answer. Let's go to the next letter. Let's analyze the word T. What do you think T would mean for you? Come on, kids, swastik. I need more people to participate. Yes? Yes, swastik?
Ma'am, tempting. T equal to tempting.
Tempting, just like chocolates and ice cream?
Yes, ma'am. We need to see many things which can relieve our stress. We can enjoy reading things.
Wow, brilliant answer. It helps you de-stress. Amazing answer. I really understand. Let's go to the word O. Children, what would O mean? How would you like to explain story with the letter U? Anybody? Yeah, Tanvi.
Ma'am, organized.
Okay, why would you say that?
Because stories have a particular start and an end, and if they're unclear, it somehow makes us feel uncomfortable. but an organized story is one of the best stories to read and hear.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tanvi. Let's go to the next letter, R. Come on, children. So it is imaginative. It helps you solve problem. It de-stresses you. It is an organized, structured write-up or a narrative which helps you imagine something. So what would R mean to you? Come on. Do stories have to be reasonable? Yes, Hannah, your grandmom tells you a story, I'm sure. Does it have to be reasonable? I'm sure you remember some stories she told you when you were a little kid. Hannah?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what memories do you have of that?
Ma'am, like if I do anything wrong, she might tell me a story to make the things correct.
Absolutely. Lesson. Story helps you teach you a lesson, isn't
And
it?
values.
Absolutely. Values. Very well put. Okay, so then let's go to the last letter, Y. Come on. I'm expecting an out of the blue answer. Anybody? Hazel, Alina, Rigved? Why? Okay, so I'm going to say, yay, it's a storytelling workshop. Yes, so this workshop is here for you to understand the nuances of telling a story. As you all know, story just sticks by us, right? Whether it's a little kid or whether it's an 80-year-old grandmom or a granddad. We all love listening to stories. And it is not just in the school arena that stories play an important role. Even in the business world, the business owners, they tell a story to sell their product. Yes, that's true. The commercials you see, right? The movies you watch, they are all there telling stories. So why we should be left behind? Don't you think we should master this art of telling a story? Say yes, to
ma'am.
story. Absolutely. There you go. Keep the energy high and your spirit higher, because here we have an exclusive workshop for you by a very seasoned, experienced, iconic, and a role model for all the Toastmasters and the aspiring speakers who want to become their best version. And that facilitator is Ms. Deepa Surendran, a mentor for me. I think she's the one when I see her, I aspired to become my best version. Whenever I see her leadership skills, they are outstanding. She has aced in the world, not only in the world of Toastmasters, but also in other places, other spaces where she is working, because of her leadership skills, her communication skills, and her love for telling a story. As you all know, she's also authored 2 books. Who can be better than someone who's here, who's going to tell how we can become a better storyteller? So thank you so very much, Ms. Deepa. I would like to extend my gratitude. It's a privilege. We are overwhelmed to have you amidst us. We had to book an appointment a month before to have her here, kids. So you can imagine that we really are going to have the value for our time. Okay. And thank you, Ms. Deepa, for coming over here. We are really, really privileged to have you amidst us. We are going to now would like to hear from you, and then you can proceed with your workshop after your address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Toastmaster Taranam or Miss Taranam, because
Yes.
I think most of our youngsters sitting over here are non-Toastmasters or non-Cavaliers, except Rigved.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, good morning, my dear children. Good afternoon. How are you all? Are you ready to listen to stories or are you ready to tell stories? What is the situation now?
I'm both.
Both. Okay, so ready to tell story as well. Okay. Now let me ask you, what kind of stories you like most? The one told by your parents or grandparents, or the ones you are watching, or the ones you are reading? What kind of stories which are more appealing to you? Tanvi?
Yes, ma'am. I really like the stories that I read because neither of my parents have found out that I like reading some books, like some things with magic. My father is nearing that pace, but my mother does not like to tell stories. The only stories that I've heard from my mother are the stories of her childhood, and those were quite interesting.
Okay. So you like to read books, I mean, stories in the books, right? And what about the visualization or like the movies of those stories? Like you have read Harry Potter, right? And you watched Harry Potter also. Which one you like?
I like the book much more because it gave me more freedom to imagine. The movie is just something which is in front of you. It's a no-brainer. You just need to look at it, process the story, and that's it. But when you read a book, you can imagine endless sorts of stuff. Especially when the book ends, you can imagine what happened next.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Now let me understand. I mean, let me start with the one kind of story, and then we will expand to other different types of stories. Okay. First thing, like when we hear the word storytelling, it's actually talking us about somebody is telling the story. That is the art of telling the story. That is called narrative art. There is a narration for and actions using the interactive methods or actions or acting also, and this is by one person. If you remember the stories, yeah, Rigod just joined, I think. If you remember the stories told by somebody, that is how in ancient days we, I mean, in the olden days when people used to tell, because those days there may not be many books or movies not there, were not there, and then the picturization or movie making, like today we are every moment we are seeing or watching a movie. Can you tell me one example of watching a movie? In when you are sitting in front of TV, you see many advertisements, commercials, right? Every 30 seconds they finish a story. Like for example, how many of you watched the ad of Lifebuoy hand wash? Most of you, right? There is a story behind that, and that story is, yes, Ayansh, right? You want to tell about that?
I don't know why, but then when I see ads, I'm like, it's so much, so many times. I watch an ad one time, I watch a Lifebuoy ad, and then again, after one ad, it's again coming up. It happens like this for multiple times.
Okay, so that is irritating you. Actually, you are not supposed to sit in front of the TV for like 1 hour long. Maybe that is why it
No,
is
that is
coming.
a half an hour only. I'll sit there for half an hour only, not much.
So actually, that is a minimum time. There is a minimum time for you to sit in front of the TV and then switch the channel, like from one channel to your books, and then start reading books, and then start talking to people. There are many different ways of communication, right? If you sit in front of the TV, what they are expecting different audience sitting in front of you, not only you. So you have to keep on changing your the source of your knowledge. Okay. But yeah, you are right. There are repeated advertisements, but that is also doing something. When we repeatedly watch the same thing, it is actually getting embedded in our brain. That's how they sell the products, isn't it? Now, when you're talking about narrative art, all these things are, we are keeping all these other channels of other modes of communication or other modes of storytelling at this moment. Okay, now let's understand how we can make a story presented in front of an audience or to another person, and com- convince that person with that message, one message. I remember one of you, I think Tanvi, was mentioning about the value, the message communicated to the audience. And that is the one and only reason why we are telling a story. It's not just for time pass. It's not uh, just for telling a story, but there should be a message communicated, a value to be communicated to the person sitting in front. That's the main reason in religion. Most of the religions we can see there is speeches going on, right? Religious speeches, and in there it is like more the speakers, the motivational speakers, they use stories embedded in their speeches, value based speeches. That's how they communicate, or they uh, prepare or create a society with people, human beings, with value based human beings. You understand? That is the actual reason for people put the value of storytelling. People are more focused on how I can communicate a particular message to the audience. You understand? That is how it is important to know, to learn the art of storytelling. Any communication, like most of you don't like teachers. Why? Because those teachers are just focusing on the subject. I'll tell you one story. One of my teachers, we wanted that teacher for all our 5 periods in all the days, all the 5 days of our schooling. We wanted the same teacher because she used to tell a story. At least 45 minutes class, at least 15 minutes, she used to tell us different stories. You all know the gravitational force, right? Yeah.
Yes,
And
sir.
you know the formula also, more than any other thing. Why? Because we are always attaching that particular formula with the story of Isaac Newton, how he got to know about that particular theory. Without the story of that apple falling on Newton, we may not remember that particular story in this intensive manner, right? So everything can be communicated attaching with a story. Okay, so now let's understand the parameters of a good story. The interactive art of using words and actions to reveal the elements and images of a story while encouraging the listener's imagination. Same thing Tanvi was mentioning. When we are reading a book, a story in a book, it gives us more rooms for imagination. And when we are watching a person telling a story or enacting a story, that is also giving us more room for imagination. So let's understand the parameters or the basics requirements of a story when we are telling a story. Storytelling has to be interactive. How can we make storytelling interactive? We need to create curiosity. And we need to encourage the audience to ask questions. Actually, Ms. Saranan told me that we will have question answer session at the end, but I am okay if you want to ask questions in between, because I want whatever I am speaking, whatever I am presenting to be interactive. So you are okay, you are open to have questions. I am open to have questions from your side. Let's make it interactive. Whenever you want me to stop, you can stop me. All right. And storytelling emerges from interaction and coordinated efforts of the teller and the audience. So you have to think, the audience has to think along with the presenter or the storyteller. How many of you know about Harikatha? Harikatha is a type of storytelling which is staying from longer time, ancient times, and then it continued over the years. And this is a kind of storyteller. This is the method used by storytellers, where they used to sing and then explain the lines of that particular song. And when they were explaining, the audience used to ask questions. Okay, so that is one method to make the audience glued to the story. Then another thing, we need to use vivid words to make it imagery, that imagery very clear in front of the audience. We need to use beautiful words when we are telling a story to make it vivid, to make the clear, vivid pictures in front of the audience. So for that, we can use any kind of words, and for that, we need to read and improve our vocabulary as well. Then vocalization. If I am telling the story of tortoise and rabbit, you know the story, right? So
Yes, ma'am.
I have heard a storyteller explaining or narrating this particular story, and he used 2 different voices, one for the rabbit and one for the tortoise. And when he was mentioning using the dialogues of the rabbit, he was like very fast. He was delivering. Oh, let's make a contest. I mean, very fast he was mentioning or delivering the dialogues. At the same time, he was using a very, oh, okay, let's go for a marathon run. we will try who will win at the end. I'm sure I will win this particular contest. So slowly he was, I mean, that was actually depicting the character of the tortoise. One very slow, but at the end, who won? The tortoise won, right? But still, the different ways of delivering the dialogue clearly put an image of the rabbit and the tortoise in front of in the minds of the listeners. Okay, so we have to use vocalization, physical movement, and gesture while delivering a story. It's very difficult when we are doing that in an online method, but still I remember when Tanvi was explaining or doing the introduction part, she was using all hand gestures and many other, facial expressions as well. So we need to come out of our comfort zone and make sure that we are able to use our body and voice to demonstrate the particular characters we are using. Then the other thing is storytelling uses actions. I mean, that storytelling presents a story. As one of you mentioned, we need to have a starting and then the body part and then a proper conclusion where we communicate that particular message. From beginning of the story, we are weaving the story around that particular value or message. That is the idea of storytelling. The other last character, storytelling encourages the active imagination of the listeners. We already mentioned this particular thing. So maybe we can form or follow a particular strategy like to make the curiosity, the conflict, or the main incident can be kept to be mentioned only at the end. That punchline has to be mentioned only at the planned stage of the story. Hope you are able to follow me. Now let's ask you, do you understand the value or the importance of storytelling in this particular era, in our era? Why we need stories? In the ancient days, that was one of the pastime activities. And then include or imbibe the value into the society by telling stories to the kids or to the people in that particular village, etc. But now we have so many different ways. We have books, we have podcasts, we have TV where movies are what is that? Movies are played, and then so many different ways. But still, storytelling and as an art, we all are here to learn that. Why we are doing that? Any idea? What is the importance? Yes, Ayansh.
I would say, I would say that the reason that we are having is because when you read a book, okay, your imagination goes on. But when there's an actual person tell you, then it creates the more. Suppose it's a way, it's a difference between a book and a real person narrating the story. There's a huge difference. I've seen it myself. So
Okay.
I was reading a book and then I was reading a short book and then I was imagining, fine. I found it okay. But then when my friend told me that same story in a storytelling, I felt as in more imagination, more
Different
interaction.
perspective, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That is one part. I mean, it is enhancing the imagination in the listener's part. But what my question is, why? What is the importance? What is the value? What we are going to get out of the storytelling? Elena?
Yes. Okay. So when you're reading a book, I understand the imagination flows, but when someone else says it, you see a different perspective. You find models that you might not think when you're reading a book. So I feel it's very important in this era.
Okay. But I want to know the benefit, like, value-based benefit, how it can be used in our life. Reading, okay, for you to understand, for you to have that the important to understand the importance of value or the imagination or the message of the story. But how it will benefit us, how we can use that particular the art of storytelling in real life to get benefit. Hazel? Yes.
I believe that storytelling increases pathos with either your audience or the person you're talking to, because you through a story you're giving a lifetime experience of them, and it's just a good mode of persuasion. So if you're trying to persuade someone, you might be able to persuade them with a story
Exactly. So
and
here
to
comes the
introduce them.
point. Yes, it here comes the point. That was the word I was looking. Persuasion. What persuasion is actually selling, marketing, and convincing the other person, motivating the other person. We need to know how we can persuade others. And without persuading, without convincing, without motivating, without able to inspire the listener, I would say we failed in that art of storytelling. Once we complete a story, something has to be communicated to the other person. And if you need to sell something, we use a commercial where there is a small story shown in front of the audience. That's what I just mentioned about the ad of what is that? That soap ads, no, where one mother and daughter is there, and then she's amazed by the beauty of the mother, and there is a story behind the communication, the connection between the mother and the daughter. So it's a small story. Okay, in just 30 seconds, they are able to sell a product by creating an impact or by sharing that, the concept of beauty and the connection between mom and daughter. So that is a story. That's how we are commercializing the art of storytelling. I'll tell you one other story. I mean, I was my previous employer, and it was a loyalty program, and our CEO, okay, he is the head of marketing as well. Whenever there is a client coming to our office, he used to tell a story. He always used to start with something on cricket, the whatever happened just the previous day or the previous day, okay, previous week, whatever, any new cricket matches. And then he tells he start talking about one of the incident in that particular one of the incidents from that particular match. And then he immediately used to connect, because most of the customers, they used to like cricket. They were fans of cricket, Dhoni, or uh, he was a New Zealand was a person from New Zealand. And then he even used to tell that once I bowled, I mean, when I was a kid, I bowled out the then cricket captain of New Zealand. And that used to create an impression on the listener, on the customer. And then he used to tell or explain our product, and then it was very easy for him to sell that product. So he used his skill on storytelling to sell the product. So when you become adults, or you become big CEOs or owners, or some big positions, you can use this particular art, what you are learning at this moment, for convincing the other person. You understand? That is the importance of storytelling. That is why our Taranam is doing this particular exercise of making you aware, making you experts in storytelling, which this skill can be used at a later stage for maybe for motivational, to become a motivational speaker. I heard one story told by Rigved earlier, and he told his love and affection towards his grandparents, and how the message actually was he procrastinated visiting his grandparents, and now he is not able to. Rigved is there. You want to tell the message of that story?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, I procrastinated that I will come see you next month or something. But at the end of the time, at the end of the year, I could see her anymore. So yeah, it was really, yeah. And I told, if whenever you get the chance, talk to someone you love, because you never know when the next moment you never might see them again.
Yes, I still remember the story. See, this is an everlasting uh, influence on the listener side. He managed to do that because of his skills, the skills he developed for storytelling. So all of you have to develop the story. I mean, you have to write as the story in the acronyms. When you mentioned, when Tarana mentioned about the acronyms, O was for organized. So when we are telling a story, it has to be organized in a particular fashion, that the curiosity has to be maintained, and then create that or reveal that particular thing only at the relevant position of the story. May not, you don't have to keep it to the end, but there is a style of storytelling. And it may be while you're telling the story, it may be while you're showing a movie, it may be while you're writing a story as well. So now let's talk about different methods of storytelling, how protagonists can actually influence by using a different style of storytelling. And this part will be managed by Deepa Surendran, and she's here. She will explain you a particular style of storytelling. So I will just switch the screen for her.
Hello.
Hello.
Before I start, since we got this opportunity to take a break from this constant monologuing, could everyone just give me your favorite story? Like, what is your favorite story? Any story, reading, movie, doesn't matter. Even if it's a story about your parents, what would be your favorite story? Anyone? Okay, Tanvi, you raised your hand first, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So there's an extremely hilarious story about my father putting a baby frog in a relative's helmet during a wedding. So the helmet was hung on a scooty handle and the frog was lying on the ground. So he just scooped him up and put him in the helmet. And as soon as the helmet went on somebody's head, screams filled the whole hall.
That's great. Elena?
So my favorite story is the series of unfortunate events. I love it. I don't know what about. It's just, I know it's quite depressive, but I love how they said all the stuff. It's just my favorite.
Good example. Hazel?
I actually have a different series that I really like. It's a book series, and it's called Murder. I like murder mysteries. So read Murder Most Unladylike, and it's like really big series with around I think 10 books, and I personally loved it. One of the reasons was because one of the characters had the same name as me, and that's why I got really intrigued. And then the story was really captivating, so I really liked it.
I will ask you to put that in the chat so I can take that recommendation. So, we have a few examples here, but one of the things that, Ms. Deepa said before is like, what is the purpose of a story, right? And she mentioned persuasion. Now, I'd like to take a little bit of a detour from that because I don't like the idea of commercializing storytelling. Sorry. My favorite reason for storytelling existing is the idea of history. Now, Tanvi's example, I feel like is most relevant to what I'm saying right now. She mentioned a story that her father told her. Now, that's the thing. My favorite story is a story my mom told me. It's not about her, but the story was about how Parsis came to settle in India after fleeing during the conquest. Now, if you don't know the story, it basically goes that Parsis came to the kingdom of Gujarat and they asked the king, can we stay here, please? And the king, instead of answering, all he did was send them a full glass of milk filled to the brim. And then what the leader of the Parsis did was mix in a spoonful of sugar and give it back. Now, through this wordless interaction, what had happened was the king was saying, Gujarat is full. There is no way to fit any more people. And what the leader of the Parsis was saying is, there is no way, we will not cause the glass of milk to overflow. We'll just melt and dissolve into the community, just like the sugar has dissolved into the milk. Now, the reason why this is my favorite story is not because of the story itself, but because one of my friends, who is a Parsi, has the exact same story. Now, I can trace my family back in Kerala to like at least 4 to 5 generations, and she can trace her family back in Gujarat for like 4 to 5 generations. So there is no chance of us interacting, and yet we both inherited the same story. And I believe that this is so important because storytelling is a way that we carry our legacy and our histories forward. You know that story of your father. Maybe, Tanvi, you'll tell it to your children or to other people. And I will remember your father through that story. And that is how these people are still alive. I know my great grandfather who died decades before I was born. Through the stories my father tell me, I know him. And through the stories from 1,000 years ago, we know about Hercules. We know about the Mahabharata. We know stories from the Bible. These are all very important because that is how humans develop. We are nothing without the collection of stories that built us. As well mentioned Isaac Newton before. Isaac Newton once said, if I am able to see far, it is only because I am standing on the shoulders of giants. We are standing on the shoulders of the stories we are told. And that is why it is so important, because it is how we remember. It is how we learn to love our humanity and the people around us in our society. Now, this connects to the type of story I'm going to tell you. The story that often we hear is ancient Greek tragedies or ancient Greek stories. Those are the most famous, the most spicy kind, right? And when looking at Joseph Campbell's book, he was an anthropologist and basically studied humanity and humanity's history, right? So one thing he identified from over thousands and thousands of myths and stories is that there seems to be a very unique way of saying it to make sure that the audience identifies with the hero. Now, the way that they do this is called the monomyth, the one story of the hero's journey. And it's a cyclic tale that maybe you learn in the future in your English classes, or maybe you've already heard of it. But essentially what goes is that the hero, much like you and me, lives a normal life in a normal place, because, regardless of whether that normal is very different from ours or it is their normal. And we live in our normal, and that is how we go. And suddenly something happens. There is a call to action. Either someone gets attacked or they get some kind of secret message from the universe, something telling them that they need to go on this journey. And then they get a bit of help, usually from someone older, someone wiser, and they get a bit of help, maybe a weapon of sorts. And then they go on this perilous journey to this other world. Now, this other world doesn't have to be literally another world. It can just be something very unfamiliar to the hero. And then also unfamiliar to us, the listeners. They go on this journey, battle whatever thing they were supposed to battle, figure out, go through their challenges. They go through their darkest moment and overcome it. And after that, they come back to their normal life. Now, after they come back to their normal life, even though it is the beginning of the story where, the beginning and the end are in the same place, the hero themselves is no longer the same because of the journey they've been through. Now, for an example, do you guys know about Percy Jackson? Is Percy Jackson a story you guys know? Nod if yes. The movie's the book, yeah. Now, Percy Jackson, he's a 12-year-old in school. His normal is that, he usually gets kicked out of school. He doesn't do well in school. But, it's a normal life in New York. And then what happens? His maths teacher turns into a demon. And now he has to go on this insane journey because, he's in danger otherwise and his mother's been kidnapped. He goes on this journey to a camp. He gets help from Kyron, his instructor. He gets friends, Annabeth and Grover. And with these friends and in this team, he goes on a journey. He goes on a journey to find the lightning bolt. He goes on a journey to find the king of the underworld and then tell them, it wasn't me who stole it. Please give me my mother back, etc. And then he comes back, he fights Ares, and then he comes back to normal. Comes back to going back to school, essentially. But he's never the same. He now knows the secret of his birth, the fact that gods exist. And this story is exactly how Percy Jackson connected with us, because it follows the hero's journey, because it's someone who's so normal and yet went on this special journey, and we went on it with them. And that's why the monomyth is one of the most common forms of storytelling that anyone can use. So if you are happening to venture out into storytelling every so often, I think you should begin with the hero's journey, because it is the easiest form of storytelling to try to get the attention of the listener and to take them on this journey. So that's it for my section. Hope you enjoyed it.
Hi, sorry, I didn't get your name, dear.
She's Arundhati.
Arundhati. Okay. Arundhati, thank you so very much. That was it was a surprise element for all of us indeed. But you came with a lot of good insights and information for the kids and you made it really, really inspiring. Thank you, Arundhati.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. We'd love to have you again. Thanks. Yeah.
She'll come later. Okay. Now, yeah, any questions on that part? Then if you have anything, just ask now. Otherwise, we'll continue with the session. And Tarana, you will be showing me the time card, right?
Yes.
All
Ma'am.
right.
30 minutes are done. So I was about to share that.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Otherwise, I'll keep on talking and then kids will get.
All right, kids, can we take some questions from you about storytelling? Do you have any pain point when you have to tell a story, but you don't know how I can make it appealing or captivating? What kind of stories do audiences love? Please ask some questions. Any question, it's fine, even if it's a silly. There's nothing as silly question. So please ask. Yes, Tanisha.
Yeah, ma'am, like I'm always confused. Like I feel that whenever we write a story, I feel that it has to get a twist in the end or in the middle, wherever. But I don't get how to give that twist. Like by adding a new character, but what will be the role of that person? I don't get it exactly.
Okay. So you want to make it interesting or there should be some catch. That is what you're trying to make, right? Okay, got a conflict or what is that? Certain change of mood or something like that. Okay. That we cannot generalize the concept, how we can bring a twist. Because we can start with a twist, we can have that in the middle, we can have that at the end as well. That depends upon the concept of the story. I'll tell you one example. I wanted to communicate about the importance of women empowerment. Okay, now in this moment, we always say that we are evolving and human beings are like, from olden days, they were not very good, but now we have evolved. But at the same time, I feel that the position of women in this era also the same or maybe little worse than the olden days. We know the story of Mahabharata, Draupadi. So I used her as a character, and then for me the conflict was how to communicate. I wanted to communicate the message was, or the theme was, the value of women in the society. So I used her conflict, the conflict she faced, the the chela, the sari thing, that was the conflict. But I didn't know how to put that in this era. I didn't want to explain the heinous experiences of a rape or anything. That this happened when I wanted to write a story when that very bad rape happened in Delhi. So I used Draupadi coming into our society and giving a speech. Okay, so and then she herself telling her experience, that bad experience of pulling her into the Rajya Sabha, that the what is that the parliament, that meeting, and then these people, Dushasana, creating that chaos, and then no men in that particular sabha raised anything against or to support her, do anything to support her. They didn't do anything. So that was a conflict I used, but that I used as part of a speech delivered by Draupadi. So when we are telling a story, we cannot just put anything in between, but we need to identify how we can tell that or communicate that message, and accordingly we have to decide where that conflict or the twist can be brought in. Maybe if I, as an author or as a narrator, Tanisha as a narrator, if we tell the incident, it may not be impactful. So we have to bring, as you correctly mentioned, character into your story, and then we can make that character explain or demonstrate or act that particular incident or a conflict. So it all depending upon the nature of the story you are trying to tell, and then accordingly you have to bring that particular conflict into the story. And it's not always a particular one incident. It can be one punchline. It can be a series of punchlines or series of dialogues between two characters. It all depends upon the nature of the story you are trying to tell, nature of the message you are trying to communicate. I mean, we know like the Aesop stories or Aesop stories, how you want to pronounce it. And then if you want to communicate a story, maybe you can introduce one character called grandma, your granny, and then you can ask her to narrate the story. This is what I did in another story which happened. I mean, I didn't want any ancient characters coming in, so I used my grandmother, my dad's mom, telling the story. Actually, this was a real story told by her to me. Okay, and then I wrote that story, and this story actually, I mean, it was attracted by so many people, and they were all, you know, inspired by the same thing. And it actually narrated what was happening three generations behind our, I mean, 3 generations behind us. So all these things are tricks and, tricks that we need to analyze what we are trying to communicate, and then fit into, I mean, bring it to fit to the story. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanisha. It was a valid question, but still, ma'am, I don't know if you can correct me, but they shouldn't be under some pressure that the story should have a twist. Is that
Yes.
to say
no
that?
need. Exactly. No need. There is no, that's why I mentioned it can be just a punchline. It can be just a dialogue between two people. It all depends upon the main thing. What you're trying to communicate is a message, a motivational message, a convincing message, or something positive to be brought into the society. How evil will be failed by the positive nature or the nanma of the protagonist. That is actually, for me, a story is trying to achieve. It can be without a message also. It can be just a time pass. But if it has to be remembered, then there should be some good message, a trick, a good thing, or an educational matter to be communicated to the other person. That's what I believe. There is no need of any conflict.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. We can proceed, and I think we still have 10 more minutes, and then
we had Ayan shared a question, no, earlier. I think he had raised his hand.
No, I had raised, but then when you were clearing her out, my doubt also cleared out.
All right. Okay. Now let me tell you 9 tips to become a good storyteller. We already mentioned about all these things, but just for us to conclude and give you some values or some points just to remember. First thing, we need to know the audience. Today, before I started preparing for the matter, like how I will with value, how effectively I'll be able to tell, or conduct this particular session. The questions I asked Ms. Taranam was, what is the age group or of the audience and how brilliant they are? So she said their age group is like 10 to 15 or 11 to 14 basically, and they are already trained on storytelling. That actually scared me and made me prepare more, because and I was really happy that I'm going to learn something from you as well. So the first thing we need to know is the audience, about the audience, how brilliant they are, how raw they are. If they are like raw, then we have to start from the scratch. Then I would have started, if she didn't give me that particular answer, then I would have started from the basics of storytelling, which I didn't have to do today. Then think about the goal of the story. That is what I was always mentioning. We need to know what message, what is the goal we are trying to achieve by telling the story. Basically, what is the particular positive value we are trying to imbibe into the listeners' minds. Then choose the right time. If it is, I told, any time, any situation, we can tell a story, because maybe we have to change the mood of the audience. Maybe we have to change the the value base of the audience. For example, we are going to visit a patient in a hospital, and if we go there and explain, talk about death, after this, my friend or my relative had the same sickness and this person had died, and I am narrating that incident, how the death of that particular person happened because of the same sickness. Do you think that is the right place or the right time to tell that particular story? No, right? At that time, we have to select a story which will actually increase the confidence or give some confidence to that patient. If the patient is not fighting to live, or if the patient's confidence is reduced by listening to our story, then we are not doing a good job. So we need to choose the right time. It can be, the stories can be told when we are in a kitchen, or the stories can be told in our corporate office meetings as well. So we need to know the audience. We need to know the goal of the story. We need to know whether this story is actually fitting at that time or at that place. Okay. Then to start with, we can use a catchy thing to hook the audience attention, because maybe we are sitting in a group of we are sitting with a group of people and all are kind of depressed, and that is the time, if we are telling the story, then maybe you can start with a joke, or if you can start with a good catchy phrase, something like, hey, listen, I had this particular experience yesterday with my colleague, and he was telling me about a game or something like that, a positive thing, and then start the story. Then it will be, you will catch the attention of the audience, something very catchy. Okay. And then we can be very clear and concise. If we can tell a story in a long story in 3 or 4 sentences, that is enough. We should not be wasting the time of the audience as well. But for kids, when we are telling the story, maybe we can enact by having more characters into the story, and then we can act or have more dialogues, and add so many punchlines, or so many funny expressions or anecdotes inside another story. All these techniques can be used, but everything depends upon the audience. Okay, so we need to be clear and concise, fitting to the audience and the situation. Then get personal. When you are enacting or telling a story of a animal or a human being, we have to be in the shoes of that particular character. We have to be empathetic about that particular character. We have to, then only the value can, or the message can be communicated in an effective manner. That is called getting personal or getting empathetic. Then be aware of your body language. Again, depending upon the audience, depending upon the situation, I can be more, use more of my body language or voice. If it is a quiet group, then mild voice is enough. But if it is in a crowd, or there is a lot of noise coming, then if you have to get the attention of the audience, we have to be loud enough, and then switch the voice fitting to the character as well. I remember Rigved's story, and he was using the dialogues of his grandparents, and he was raising his voice, not only raising, but matching to the grandpa's voice. It was really apt for that particular story in that moment. So use the body language and voice fitting to the characters. Now practice often. If you're thinking that stories can be told on a fly, that's not the correct way of doing it. We have to practice. We have to write the story in an organized manner, or prepare, and then prepare whether this organization will be good, or like as Tanisha was asking, where the twist is required, then punchlines, where it can be put. All these things has to be prepared and practiced very well to get the required effectiveness communicated to the listeners' minds. Then ask for feedback. And this is the time for me to ask feedback, how better I could have done it. Okay, so now it's your turn to talk. Everybody, please.
Yes, children, we have now dived into a segment for Q&A, question and answer. So now you have the person here. It will come from her, whatever questions you have regarding storytelling. Yes,
You can tell me a story based on what we discussed in the past 30-40 minutes, or you can give me feedback. You could have done this, then it would have been appealed more to us, or you can ask a question as well. So it's up to you. Yes, Swastik, you have a very good background. I think it is your hero.
No, ma'am, it's a character from a web series.
Okay, and influence, that is an influencer for you? Positive,
ma'am,
negative, or you just admire?
I might just like that character, ma'am, because he taught the main character some interesting things from which the main character become a very great person and saved
Okay.
the whole village and had some things which I admire.
Great. Okay. So what is your question?
Ma'am, I wanted to ask that how to choose the right time to change the story so that the audience can be attracted to the story I'm telling.
What time?
Yes, ma'am. That I am saying very sad things, but the audience is like very now bored. So how can he change that?
Okay, so include a dialogue and then ask whether, uh, but you don't want to change the mood of the story, right? Or you
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
change the mood of the story itself? I mean,
No, ma'am.
okay, yeah, continue.
I don't want to change the whole story or just shift to another topic, but I just want the audience to be more attracted to the story. If the
You want,
story is a sad story, I want the audience to be just attracted to that whole flow.
okay, so you want to ensure that the audience is actually listening to you. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you can ask questions like, what do you think at this moment? What is the feeling of the particular hero? Like, for example, Star Wars, when you're watching the Star Wars, you will know that the hero is just actually, very lazy initially. And then he had a calling for adventure and then he was going. And then suddenly they are bringing the twist. Here also, when you're talking, when you're telling the story, when you're telling a sad story, you can just bring in a question and ask what is the emotion at this moment of this particular hero or something like that. You just ask, throw a question to the audience, and when we are getting a particular question, then our brain will suddenly become alert, and then start responding or start listening to the speaker, to the storyteller, isn't it? So
Yes, ma'am.
actually you have to bring in a particular question, anything which is actually fitting at that moment.
that's right.
Thank
Ma'am,
you.
if I
And
may-
why do you want to tell a sad story?
Ma'am, I mostly tell hilarious story, but ma'am, sometimes I cannot make much hilarious stories, so I have to shift to sad story because they are more easy to make.
Okay, but at the end of the sad story, there is a learning. I mean, there is a lesson how to switch moods to the happiness, right? I mean, because we cannot just leave the audience with that sad mood, crying mood. You always have to think about positive emotions and imbibe positive emotions into the audience minds. Otherwise, oh my God, I don't want to go to listen to Swastik's stories. I mean, he always makes me sad. That is not a positive emotion, right? Now you're
Yes, ma'am.
smiling. That is a that is a better way of ending the particular session. Make the audience to be happy, to be positive, to do something good. That is the way. I think that is the end point of this story. I mean, the result of the story. Okay,
Ma'am,
that's
if
what
I
I
may,
believe.
if I may just add one thing, Swastik, if in the middle, while narrating the story, you realize that your audience is kind of getting dull and not responding to your story well, but you still have to tell a sad story because that's what you have chosen to say. Okay, you can use the power of pause. Make sure in some parts of your story you're suddenly getting silent. That builds the anticipation in the listener's mind, and they're suddenly going to just put their phone aside and say, oh, this looks exciting, let me find out what's going to happen next in Swastik's life. How is he going to overcome this challenge, right? Use the power of pause rather than sounding monotone. they are going to definitely switch off. Use the power of pause. That's,
That
that's going to
brings the
give you
curiosity as well.
right, right. Okay, we have next question, ma'am. We have Shreyas. Yes,
Yes,
Shreyas.
yes.
So far, I have learned use the climax one in using the characters. But I want to ask you how to use the climax part when we are using animal as a character.
What is it? It was not clear. Taranam, did you get the question?
Yeah. He's trying to say that we usually have a point in the story when it's climax, where it's an intense point of the story. So how we can create, when if we have an animal character in the story, how can we create a climax around that?
Climax for that. So that, see, you are always narrating a story, I mean, an incident. It will end at one point, right? We cannot continue the story with the normal things. I mean, nobody will be there to listen. I mean, if they are continuing the story without any value or without any interesting, I got up in the morning, I took bath, I had my breakfast. This is like, one time for the story. After that, I cannot continue. Tomorrow also I did the same. I cannot continue the story. So something with a positive note or a change or a different something happened, and that will be the climax of your story. And mostly storytellers or motivators use this story to give some positive value to the listeners. So that is coming out of the climax. So if either the evil is getting destroyed, and then that gives a message to the audience that, yeah, something, if I am having a villain's mindset, then I will not succeed in this in my life. I will not be I will not be able to become a leader. I will not be able to become a hero. So evil's end or evil's getting destroyed, that will become the climax. Or something good is happening after the actions of the hero, and he is becoming or she's or whoever is becoming the protagonist, giving a message to the society by bringing a change. So these are the climaxes. And I don't know whether that is the exact question.
Shreyas,
Shreyas.
Shreyas, it all depends on what kind of story are you trying to weave. Okay, there can be one fixed climax which we will be able to tell you. It all depends on
Exactly.
what the plot is, what is the conflict in the story you have, and what is that point, where is that point you want to, take the audience at a higher stake, and then definitely, do the resolution part after the climax. But it all depends on what plot you have in your mind. Okay, and there's a difference with the way you write your story and the way you say your story. If you are telling a story, it doesn't have to have like an intense point. Maybe that intense point is in the start of the story. You want to you want to say something very, twisted in the start, and then slowly show the resolution towards the end. It all depends on you. You are the architect. Okay. Yeah. We take one last question and then we disperse. So we have one. Can we have one more question, children? No questions. Sure. Okay, Hazel.
Hazel.
Yeah, Hazel.
So like let's say you're saying like a suspense or a thriller story, or let's say like a horror type story. Of course you would use pauses a lot to create more tension among the audience. But what if you cannot use pauses too much, otherwise it just seems so scattered, right? What can we do in such situations?
What you do in such situation? You continue the story, you create something. Maybe you can crack a joke if it is a happy story. Maybe you can bring a sudden character, as Tanvi or Tanisha was mentioning earlier. You can bring another character and then you can make that character talk as well, or you can ask a question to the audience, or you can have another anecdote within the story as well. So it is all, these are the skills we need to have in our hand or developed over the years of experience by telling the story again and again. The thing here is that, we are evolving by telling the stories or writing the stories by getting feedback, collecting feedback. Our brain, human brain, is always learning and evolving. We are trying to improve. So it's my, what I have to tell you kids is like, I mean, I think you know better than me, so I should not be calling you kids. You are, more like adults in storytelling now. So what you will be doing over the years is like, you never stop telling the stories. Okay, with your friends, with your parents, with your teachers, or wherever you get an opportunity, you try to bring a story, tell the story or tell the incident, narrate the incident in a story style. I mean, with an interesting end, and which is actually convincing the other party, maybe your parents or teachers or whoever, friends, to do something positive out of your whatever exercise you are doing, telling the story. Okay, so something positive has to come out of that, and then that will give you more experience, and that will teach you how to make the story interesting without making the audience dull or bored. So it's all self-learning, I will say. You get experience by listening to the stories from good speakers, or attend classes like this, listen to others speaking. Everybody is gaining by doing only. There is no one trick we can tell you, but by experience, by doing it again and again, you will get the knowledge or wisdom how to tackle that particular situation.
I understand, but are there any alternatives that I can use instead of like for creating tension in such stories, like or suspense, instead of just taking pauses every few sentences?
Of course. See, if you like, see what I used to do. I mean, we used to have, like, sessions where play like 2 hour, 3 hour sessions going on, and every 10 minutes we have to give a wish or a message. Okay, because we are in certain positions. So what I used to do, I used to keep a collection of movie clips where a positive change is told. I mean, when I was a public relations manager, what I used to do, I used to collect clips from the movies or TikTok videos as well, where a public relations is used. Like, for example, one of the speeches I used to have is in my collection, was Bill Gates' story, where he was mentioning everything we do is public relations. If I turn this side or turn that side, that is actually creating an image of me, or I am trying to create a brand. So you can have movie clips. I mean, if it is online or if you are on the stage, you can have movie clips or videos of motivational speakers or stories or anything even from movies or from cartoons. And that will actually, change the mood of the audience suddenly. Oh my God, now something different is coming. It's a drama, or create a drama itself. You can bring in another speaker, like the way I try to do here. So it actually breaks the monotonous nature of the speaker itself. So anything possible to create suspense or break that, not that normal style, you can do.
Okay.
Hazel, just to add to what ma'am said, we are not saying you pause at every word or every sentence. Just the strategic pause where your audience is going to get captivated. For example, you have a dog named Gucci. Okay, he's sick. He's rushed to the hospital. Okay, and you have to describe that scene in a very through the emotional tone. Okay, so you are not going to keep saying Gucci was sick. We didn't know what to do. We rushed to the hospital. Okay, that is not required. Imagine if you said like this: one afternoon, Gucci woke up with intense fever and shiver. We took him to the hospital, panicking. The doctor, he was rushed to the OT. The door closed. Here, you're trying to build the suspense. Okay, after 15 minutes of waiting, finally, the door opened. The doctor came in with sulken face, dull, looking down. You're describing the person's emotions at that point, at the same time, so that it builds the curiosity. And the doctor uttered the word, "I'm sorry." Here you're trying to use your voice, change the tone, okay? Use different emotion, okay? From panicking to now, you're trying to break the silence and say, see, this is what happened. So I'm not saying you describe the whole incident of Gucci being sick, with pauses. No, strategically. You mentioned one place, even if it's a suspense story, just strategic pauses. Otherwise, it's going to get very boring. You are right. Nobody wants to listen to a story, just like going up and down every often. No, we don't want that. Okay, so just you have to be very, very strategic at pauses. Yeah. All right. Okay, children. So that brings us to the end of this insightful workshop. We would like to call upon Ayansh to kindly propose the vote of thanks. Okay, please, everyone, switch on your videos wherever you are. Shreyas, kindly do the needful. All right. Ayansh, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. What a fabulous workshop we witnessed today. My name is Ayansh Gupta, and today I'm going to propose the vote of thanks. First, let me thank our facilitator, Ms. Deepa Surendran, for conducting such an insightful workshop. We have all learned a great deal about storytelling. Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of Active Kids Club, please accept this token of our appreciation.
Thank you
And
very much.
we look forward to seeing you again. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank our club coach, Ms. Tarunam Sheikh, for organizing this workshop. Thank you, ma'am. So, friends, the best way to learn is to put the learning to use. So, go ahead and apply for whatever you have learned today and become a better speaker and an amazing storyteller. Thank you, friends. See you in next class.
Thank you, Ayansh. Can we hear it for Ayansh? We hear it for Tanvi, and we hear it for Arshia for doing their roles, apart from just being participants for today's workshop. Thank you, all three of you. You did a commendable job. That brings us to the end of the workshop. Like to personally and gratefully thank Ms. Deepa. She is superbly busy, but she still chose to be here amidst you and share all the learning and things which she has gained from her experience as a speaker and a leader. Okay, and there were so many things which I have with me. It's about all the things what I could gain about how story can be told with vivid imagery, vocalization, using a message in the story, word choice, organizing a story, including dialogues in a story. On the other hand, she's also shared 9 tips and tricks how storytelling can be made effective. I'm sure you all have absorbed it. Now let it penetrate into real life. Don't keep that learning, keep it in one part of your brain. Put it into use, and you are going to see magic happening. Okay. So on that note, we are going to have a nice, cute selfie by everyone. Everyone's camera is on. So this is the best moment to capture. Everybody, a cute, nice smile from everyone. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Deepa. Thank you so very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, children.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you next class. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye. Bye-bye.